Do you have confidence in Attorney General Pam Bondi?
I do. America is safer with Pam Bondi as Attorney General.
Still, Elon Musk, once a close Trump ally and now a frequent critic, posting that the president should just release the files as promised.
Yamiche Alcindor joins us now from Warren, New Jersey. And Yamiche, this isn't just dividing the so-called MAGA movement. We are also hearing from some Democrats, too.
That's right, Hallie. Some Democrats are using this controversy over the Epstein files to criticize the president. Today, one senator said this fight is a sign of the chaos and disorder within the Trump administration. Hallie?
Yamiche Alcindor, traveling with the president in New Jersey. Thank you. The Trump administration also today appealing a federal judge's ruling from last week, saying officials cannot rely only on a person's race or language when deciding whether to detain them. The Homeland Security Secretary today denying that people have been targeted solely based on those factors. Still ahead tonight, why the AI chatbot Grok is now out with an apology. To the Middle East now, where the push toward a potential ceasefire now seems to be stalled. Matt Bradley is joining us from Jerusalem tonight. And Matt, we are getting reports of escalating violence in Gaza, right?
That's right, Hallie. Good evening. Yet another fresh tragedy in the Gaza Strip. An Israeli drone strike killed at least 10 people, most of them children, as they waited in line for water at the Nuseirat refugee camp. Now, in a rare acknowledgement, the Israeli military said the strike was a mistake, that it regretted, and it blamed a technical malfunction. Now, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza reported yet another shooting at an aid distribution site in Rafah yesterday that killed at least 32 people, but the IDF said it wasn't aware of any reports of casualties. But relief for the people of Gaza might not be forthcoming. A senior Hamas official told NBC News today that he isn't expecting a ceasefire deal anytime soon. Hallie?
Matt Bradley in Jerusalem, thank you. Also tonight, an AI chatbot saying sorry. We're talking about Grok, which is produced by Elon Musk's company XAI, apologizing for what it calls horrific behavior after it produced a series of anti-Semitic posts last week. The company blamed a network update for the posts and says they've taken steps to course correct. We are back in a moment with a possible scientific breakthrough. Our researchers could be on the verge of a colossal comeback for some extinct species. We are back with something literally out of a movie. Scientists making major progress toward bringing extinct species back from the dead. Marissa Parra has a closer look.
Oh my God.
It looks like a work of science fiction.
There were 9 species of the dinosaur-sized giant birds.
But this big bird, the long-lost New Zealand native moa, may be making a colossal comeback.
It was a 13.5-foot, 500-pound bird.
It's the latest endeavor from genetic engineering company Colossal Biosciences, trying to bring back extinct creatures from the past. Like the direwolf and the woolly mammoth.
Why this bird, of all the birds?
We as humanity actually hunted them to extinction about 600 years ago. So it's a way to kind of undo the sins of the past.
Colossal says the science behind the so-called de-extinction involves extracting DNA from ancient bones or fossils and editing genes of its closest current relatives to eventually create an embryo or egg of the archaic animal. Procuring the necessary DNA for the moa bird became much easier once a familiar name entered the ring.
We want to be able to give the moa a natural environment.
None other than Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson partnering with Colossal to resurrect this quintessentially New Zealand bird.
He's not just a passive investor. He actually has a collection of 300 to 400 moa bones.
But as Jurassic Park prophesied, sometimes things can go very wrong. Concerns that keep ecologists like Dave Strayer up at night.
These are amazing technologies. They produce enormous benefits to conservation, but they should not be deployed naively. We have lots of things that have gotten loose from supposedly secure facilities.
The team at Colossal says the gamble is worth the payoff.
I think the best thing that we can do for humanity is to bring the biodiversity crisis to the forefront, but do it in a way that's exciting.
He's betting on a future where, with a little luck and a whole lot of science, even extinction can be rewritten. Marissa Parra, NBC News.
When we come back, there's good news tonight about an old school solution to a modern day problem. There is good news tonight about the old school technology helping to make modern connections. At this workshop in rural Vermont, what's old is new again. A blast from the past that looks cool and sounds cool. But for Patrick Schlock, it's his way of paying it forward.
It started as sort of a hobby, and it spiraled into something that is a pretty cool public service.
For the last year and a half, Patrick has been buying old payphones and fixing them up before putting them to work around town.
There are large swaths of the state without cell phone coverage. The Vermont ethos is very neighbor helping neighbor. So I figured that's the way I can contribute.
Inspired by similar efforts in cities like Philadelphia and Detroit, Patrick has installed phones at places like this general store, a rest stop, and a library. But they're not payphones, technically, since they're free to use, sort of. Patrick pays for each call out of his own pocket.
I call it a pay less phone because you don't need change.
Holly LeGue is the director of the Latham Memorial Library, home to one of the phones.
These kids wouldn't have another option to give their parents a call if we weren't able to offer this phone.
In just a month, this phone made more than 200 calls by families like the Kramers.
There's a lot of times where Ian and my other kids come to the library after school before I can pick them up, and they don't have cell phones yet.
Sometimes I don't know when I'm going to get picked up from the library, so I can just call mom or dad.
These phones, not just useful, they're turning back time.
There is just kind of a fun element. I mean, in libraries, we love to bring older technology into the hands of people who might remember it fondly or maybe have never seen it before. So it brings a lot of joy.
And Patrick's got new locations planned with the same mission. Neighbor helping neighbor.
That's the way I can contribute. Kids need to phone home. It doesn't matter why you need to use the phone, but that can be a positive benefit for the community.
That is Nightly News for this Sunday. Tom will be back tomorrow. I'm Hallie Jackson. For all of us here at NBC, thanks for watching and have a great week.
We thank you for...
This Sunday, searching for answers. Texas Hill Country reels from devastating flash floods with over 100 dead, including 36 children and more still missing.
I just had a gut feeling that something bad was about to happen.
Why was there no updated flood warning system? And did the Trump administration respond fast enough?
Who's to blame? Know this. That's the word choice of losers. It's easy to sit back and say, oh, what could have happened here or there, you know. Maybe we could have done something differently. This was a thing that has never happened before.
Plus, immigration enforcement. A federal judge blocks ICE officers in California from making arrests solely based on race and language.
If ICE officers are racist for enforcing the law, what's that make members of Congress? They wrote the damn law.
While Democratic lawmakers visit the so-called Alligator Alcatraz Migrant Detention Center in Florida.
There are really disturbing vinyl conditions. This place needs to be shut the hell down.
I'll speak to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And deals or no deals? President Trump ramps up his trade war yet again.
August 1st they pay. And everybody pays.
Threatening steeper tariffs on nearly all U.S. trading partners.
90 deals in 90 days. Well, by my count, he's about 88 trade deals short.
My guest this morning, Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming and Democratic Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor, Adrian Elrod, former senior advisor to the Harris campaign, Mark Short, former legislative affairs director for President Trump, and New York Times White House correspondent Tyler Pager. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. President Trump sent the global economy into uncertainty again this week with threats to further escalate his trade war. Telling me in a wide-ranging phone interview he plans to impose blanket 15 to 20% tariffs on nearly all U.S. trading partners. After we spoke, announcing 35% tariffs on Canada and 30% tariffs on both Mexico and the European Union, some of the largest trading partners to the United States.
We've been taken advantage of for many, many years by countries, both friend and foe. And frankly, the friends have been worse than the foes in many cases.
As he makes these promises left and right, he doesn't care whether he executes them or not, but the American people do. So remember, 90 deals in 90 days. Well, by my count, he's about 88 trade deals short.
And on immigration, the Trump administration continues to ramp up its deportation enforcement with ICE raids across Southern California. A judge ruling that immigration officers there can't solely stop and detain someone based on their race or what language they're speaking, among other factors. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem sharply critical of the judge who made the decision.
He's frankly an idiot. We have all the right in the world to go out on the streets and to uphold the law and to do what we're going to do. So none of our operations are going to change.
If ICE officers are racist for enforcing the law, what's that make members of Congress? They wrote the damn law.
Well, Democratic lawmakers raised the alarm after visiting the so-called Alligator Alcatraz Migrant Detention Center in Florida.
There are really disturbing, violent conditions, and this place needs to be shut the hell down.
What we saw in there is very simple. We saw humans being held in cages.
Those are claims Florida Republicans deny. But we begin this morning with the devastation in Texas, where the death toll from those powerful flash floods has risen to 121, including 36 children, with 166 people still missing.
My husband started panicking because there was no way for us to get out. There was no way for us to get up, and so he tried to bust out the window.
I just remember having to get evacuated and the water kept rising.
So I was losing my grip, so all the things what if I let go and I just go with the current and stuff. I was really scared.
In our phone interview, President Trump telling me he thinks it would make sense to put alarms up to alert residents of flooding in the future, and praising the work of first responders and his Homeland Security Secretary, amid questions about her handling of the response and whether more could have been done more quickly. The president visiting the disaster zone on Friday.
I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of bad ones. I've gone through a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. I've never seen anything like this. This is a bad one. A little narrow river that becomes a monster. And that's what happened.
And joining me now is Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Secretary Noem, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you for being here after a remarkably busy week. I did have an opportunity to speak with President Trump by phone. He did praise your response to the floods in Texas. There are obviously a lot of questions, though, so I want to talk to you about some of those, including about a rule that you recently implemented. It reportedly requires that every FEMA contract, every grant over $100,000 be personally approved by you. Now, officials within the agency have told multiple news outlets that the policy led to a slower deployment of some FEMA resources, including urban search and rescue crews. So let me just ask you, did your policy delay some of the critical response resources on the ground?
Those claims are absolutely false. Within just an hour or two after the flooding, we had resources from the Department of Homeland Security there helping those individuals in Texas. It was a heartbreaking scene, and I think it's been well covered about what the Coast Guard did, how they were deployed immediately and helped rescue so many individuals from those floodwaters. And we had Border Patrol down there with their tactical teams, and FEMA was there just within a few hours as well. So those claims are false. They're from people who won't put their name behind those claims. And those call centers were fully staffed and responsive. And this is the fastest, I believe, in years, maybe decades, that FEMA has been deployed to help individuals in this type of a situation.
Well, let's drill down a little bit. I know there were resources that were deployed, but I think the question revolves around, were all of the necessary resources deployed? According to reports, multiple FEMA officials said you didn't approve the deployment of these FEMA search and rescue teams until Monday, which was 72 hours after the floods started.
No, they were deployed immediately as soon as they were requested, and I think what matters here is what what the local officials on the ground say and what their feedback is. You know, I was there that very morning, when the flooding was happening, and was with those emergency responders right away, with the governor, with Kid, who's running the state's response, and every one of them will tell you that they got everything that they needed when they asked for it immediately, and that they've never seen the federal government respond in support of a state's management of a disaster situation like this. So those claims, I don't know who's making them out of FEMA, and because FEMA has been incredibly responsive, we've had over 700 different employees engaged right in Texas, and as soon as that disaster request was put in, forwarded to the White House and approved within hours.
Well, when was the request put in, and when did you approve it? And is this accurate that there's this $100,000 sign-off?
The $100,000 sign-off is for every contract that goes through the Department of Homeland Security.
So that's
it's an accountability on contracts that go forward, but there was no breaking contracts. Those contracts were approved as soon as they were in front of me. And FEMA knew they were fully to deploy the instant that the local officials asked for the request.
When did you get the request for the search and rescue teams and other resources?
Immediately responded. Yes, and everyone will tell you.
According to reports, they didn't arrive
the
until.
governor will say, well, this is what I think is really unfortunate, is that we have a situation where so many individuals are playing politics with what happened to Texas. And the governor and the emergency responders on the ground, the mayor of that city, the judge in that county who has some authority over emergency response, every one of them said, as soon as we asked for help, they were here. The federal government was here. And we didn't just deploy FEMA, we deployed our Coast Guard and BORTAC teams. Border Patrol was amazing. Every single agency that we had was there helping as many individuals as we possibly could. And that's what I think is remarkable. It's a very different response, I think, from the federal government we've ever seen in a disaster like this, because we had so many different agencies immediately respond, and that's the way that it should be.
I do want to talk big picture in just a moment, but the New York Times is reporting that thousands of calls from flood victims to FEMA call centers went unanswered in the middle of this ongoing disaster because you didn't renew contracts to keep call center staff in place until nearly 1 week after the floods. Why did it take so long to extend those
It's
contracts?
just false. Those contracts were in place.
It didn't take 5 days?
No employees were off of work. Every one of them was answering calls. So false reporting, fake news, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging that during this time when we have such a loss of life and so many people's lives have turned upside down, that people are playing politics with this. Because the response time was immediate, and if you talk to anyone in Texas that was there, that was a part of this operation, they would say the federal government and President Trump immediately responded.
Just to be very clear, on July 7th, 15.9% of calls were answered. I mean, does that concern you that only 15% of calls were answered? These were people in a desperate state. FEMA, often the first call that they make, only 15% were answered on July 7th, several days after the flood.
These contracts were in place, and those people were in those call centers, and they were picking up the phone and answering these calls from these individuals. So that report needs to be validified. I'm not certain it's accurate, and I'm not sure where it came from. And the individuals who are giving you information out of FEMA, I'd love to have them put their names behind it, because the anonymous attacks to politicize the situation is completely wrong. These emergencies need to be conducted exactly how President Trump handled this one. It was that the local responders are the ones who execute the response. The state comes in and manages it, and then the federal government comes in and supports it. And as soon as Texas asked for anything, we were there.
Just very quickly, I mean, disasters often cost millions, if not billions of dollars. You've acknowledged there is this policy you implemented to sign off on contracts that exceed $100,000. Why add extra red tape when there is a crisis of this magnitude?
It's not extra red tape. It's making sure everything is getting to my level and that it's immediately responded to. This was not slowed down at all. In fact, it was much more responsive. If you remember, I was there. I was standing right there long before this report ever came out, and people were asking, and we were granting permission in real time. So the false reporting has been something that is inappropriate, and it's something that I think we need to clear up, and that this response was by far the best response we've seen out of FEMA, the best response we've seen out of the federal government in many, many years, and certainly much better than what we saw under Joe Biden.
Two more quick ones on FEMA, then we need to get to deportation. Senator Elizabeth Warren is calling for you to resign. Your response, is there any chance you would resign?
No, there's not, and I'm I hadn't heard that, but, I don't care what she thinks.
Very quickly, we have heard President Trump, we have heard you say that ultimately FEMA needs to be eradicated. We heard the tone shift a bit this week. Bottom line, Madam Secretary, will the president move to eradicate FEMA altogether?
I think the president recognizes that FEMA should not exist the way that it always has been. It needs to be redeployed in a new way, and that's what we did during this response. If you saw, it's not just FEMA that can respond to these situations. The federal government has all kinds of assets, and we deployed them. The Coast Guard coming in and saving individuals with their rescue swimmers, with their helicopters. They had fixed-wing aircraft deployed as well. Border Patrol with their BORTAC teams, and now we've got also some dog teams that are down there helping with recovery efforts, and then FEMA alongside of them, helping people setting up shelters, deploying supplies. It was all immediate, and that's what the president wants to do, is empower these states to run their emergency, and we come in and support them. And immediately, when those requests were made, they were approved and deployed.
So I just want to be very clear, and we're going to move on to deportation. President no longer wants to eradicate FEMA, but what you're saying is to overhaul FEMA, but not eradicate it altogether.
I think he wants it to be remade so that it's an agency that is new in how it deploys and supports states.
Let me get your reaction. A federal judge in Los Angeles temporarily blocked ICE raids in Southern California, saying that federal agents cannot target people without reasonable suspicion, and using factors like skin color, the language that people speak. Will you comply with the judge's order?
Absolutely, but we've never done that. We've never done that. What we have always done is built a case and done investigative work in who we go after and who we target. And so this judge is ridiculous in the fact that he put forward a decision like this. We will appeal it and we will win it, because over and over again, when our ICE officers are out there getting the worst of the worst off of our streets, they're using the investigative backgrounds and information that they have from either criminal records or what they have for charges, or individuals who are breaking our federal laws that need to be brought to
Madam
justice.
Secretary, Tom Homan, the White House borders are said as much this week. He told Fox News that physical appearance was a factor in detaining individuals. What do you say to those who hear that and say that is racial profiling?
The facts of how we do our investigations and our casework and what ICE officers are doing today is they're going out there and building a case just like other law enforcement officers do. They're going out there and doing the investigative work, gathering the information to decide how we're going to run our ops and how we're going to target individuals. And overwhelmingly, people have heard the president say over and over again about how important it is that we continue to go after the worst of the worst. This week, we've got murderers off the street, rapists, child pedophiles. If you look at that marijuana grow facility that we recently just did an operation on, over 319 individuals were brought into custody, and 14 unaccompanied children that means that they don't have their parents with them. They're working in a facility where they could be exploited, trafficked, maybe sex trafficked, and then we've got individuals there who are working at the same facility who are creating, distributing, and taking advantage of children for child pornography. So this is something that President Trump has taken seriously, is protecting children.
Couple more here, if we can get them in. Florida lawmakers visited the migrant detention center in Florida, which your administration has dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz said that the conditions there are inhumane. More than 30 people stuffed into a jail cell. She said they get their drinking water and they brush their teeth from the same place where they go to the bathroom. Madam Secretary, what do you say to these lawmakers who argue this is not humane treatment of individuals, of humans?
Well, our detention centers at the federal level are held to a higher standard than most local or state centers and even federal prisons. The standards are extremely high. Now, this is a state-run facility at Alligator Alcatraz, but they have a contrast. Well, I've been there and I've seen these rooms that they are in. I wouldn't call them jail cells. I would call them a facility where they are held and that are secure facilities, but are held to the highest levels of what the federal government requires for detention facilities.
Democrats have called them cages, though.
I wish they would have said that back during the Biden administration and back when Democrats were in the White House and they were piling people on top of each other on cement floors and literally didn't have 2 feet to move. They never did that, and that's why this politics has to end. We took cameras in there. We will take cameras in there and show people what these facilities look like, because if you compare them to what happened under the Biden administration, And under the Obama administration, these centers are at the highest levels, and they're even higher than what our federal prison standards are, or state or local often are.
And yet your deportation policies are different, and you are finding new facilities, including this one, Alligator, Alcatraz, and you say there could be more very quickly.
We are looking for more information and how we can get more detention centers, but I would encourage people to self-deport. That is the easiest thing for these families to do, because then you get the chance to come back. Then you get the chance to come back to the United States, and that's exactly what we want, is them to do it the right way.
All right, Secretary Christine, thank you so much for being here in person. We really appreciate it. And when we come back, Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming joins me next. Welcome back, and joining me now is Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. Senator Barrasso, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you back. Let's start with President Trump's escalating trade war. This week announcing that he may impose tariffs of up to 35% against Canada. Worth noting, in your own state of Wyoming, more than half of imports come from Canada. Canada supports about 13,000 jobs in Wyoming. Are President Trump's tariffs going to hurt Wyoming, Senator?
Well, the ranchers in Wyoming are very happy with what President Trump has done in terms of beef. I was at the Wyoming Fair last night, hearing lots of people very happy with this bill that we just passed. But remember, Republicans ran for office to make this country safer and more prosperous. And tariffs are just one part of our comprehensive economic plan to do that. So we're 6 months into this administration, and let's take a look at the things that voters are most concerned about. And we're in the right direction on all of those. Inflation is down. Gas prices are at the lowest in 4 years. What we've seen is the flow of illegal immigrants at the border has dropped to a trickle. We have passed and made permanent the largest tax cuts in American history. And American strength at home and abroad has been seen all around the world. So we have gotten America back on track, and the Democrats have been fighting us every step along the way, Chris.
Well, Senator, let me ask you, we are going to talk about the president's legislation that just passed, but in terms of these tariffs, you've seen the president make these threats in the past and then pull them back in some instances. Are you hoping that President Trump reverses course and pulls back on this threat of 35% tariffs against Canada, again, one of Wyoming's biggest trading partners?
Well, President Trump continues to put America first, American jobs, American wages, American workers, and this is what the Trump policy has been. When we use this tool, and he's using it very effectively, you take a look at what happened just the other night, the numbers coming out from the Treasury Department. We actually ran a surplus this past June, because, first time in 8 years, because of tariff revenue coming in. When you add that to what we've done with the tax cuts and with letting people keep more of their own money, it makes a big difference in people's lives. I am amazed that people continue to underestimate President Trump's ability to negotiate good deals for America. He wants to get jobs back to this country. He wants to get wages up, and he's very good at bringing people to the table. Our ranchers are happy. Look, we are so dependent on China for so many things. We had just in Friday, the Secretary of Energy came to Wyoming, where we, for the first time in 70 years, opened a rare elements mine, rare minerals. China has a stranglehold on us for those important minerals. We did one in Wyoming. We need to get those good paying jobs here and make sure we're no longer dependent on all of these foreign policies around the country, around the world. Some of these people hold us hostage.
Let me ask you about the president's, what he has dubbed the big, beautiful bill. It's now officially the law of the land. My upcoming guest, Governor Andy Beshear, calls it, quote, the most destructive bill I've ever seen in my lifetime. He argues it's actually an attack against rural America. By some estimates, nearly 11 million people could lose Medicaid coverage. Some 68,000 people are covered by Medicaid in your state, Senator. What is your message to those in your state who may be worried about losing their Medicaid coverage?
Well, people in Wyoming know me as Wyoming's doctor. I practice medicine here and have taken care of more people on Medicaid and operated on them over my years of practice more than all Democrats in Congress combined. And I know how important it is for us to strengthen Medicaid, which is what we did. Let me talk about that in a second. Let's talk about this bill itself. Largest tax cut in American history. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. These are things that are going to put money in people's pockets. We've done this, made these tax cuts permanent. That's $2,000 a year in tax savings for hardworking Americans. There's additional money for child tax credits. That's going to help working families. We do more to secure the border, to increase our military. And then being from Wyoming, an energy state, we are an energy breadbasket for our country. We are going to be able to produce more American energy here, which is going to bring down the cost of heating your home, cooling your home, or gasoline even better. That is the contrast of what Republicans are doing. To your next guest, the governor of Kentucky, who wants to run for president, American people have rejected the last 4 years of high prices and open borders.
Well, look, maybe, hopefully he'll make that announcement here on the program, Senator. But let's stick to this issue of Medicaid because, look, President Trump promised repeatedly he was not going to cut Medicaid. Senator Tom Tillis is warning it's going to cost Republican seats in the midterms. Do you believe that this bill could cost Republican seats in the midterms over that promise the president made that he wasn't going to sign a bill that would cut Medicaid?
The more people hear about what's in this bill that's going to help them personally in their own lives, keep them safer as well as more prosperous, the more people we're going to want to support what the Republicans are doing. Let's talk about Medicaid for a second. And you talked about rural areas. So I'm a doctor, practiced in Wyoming, rural and frontier medicine. In this bill, there's $50 billion set aside for rural hospitals to make sure that they can stay no longer in jeopardy, but give them the security that they need. Medicaid has become a magnet for waste, for fraud, for abuse, and even corruption. And during the votes on this bill, the Democrats said, no, keep sending Medicaid to illegal immigrants. There are 1.2 million illegal immigrants on Medicaid right now. American people reject that. We have over 5 million people sitting at home who are able to work, who are on Medicaid, and choose not to work. Republicans believe there should be work requirements. Democrats voted no, not even modest work requirements. If the Democrats were still in charge, everyone's taxes would be going up and would be less safe and less secure as a nation.
Senator, a couple things. 92% of people who are on Medicaid are either working or would qualify for an exemption. And it is worth just reminding people, folks who are here who are undocumented actually aren't eligible to receive Medicaid. So to that point, Democrats say they're gearing up to make this a centerpiece of their campaign. I do want to ask you something on foreign policy, though, because there's been a lot of focus.
Well, let me just point out there that there are still 1.2 million illegal immigrants on Medicaid because states have set up money laundering schemes to drain Medicaid, to pay for illegal immigrants. And the study that you have talked about earlier about the 92%, that is the Kaiser Foundation, that has clearly been debunked. There are lots of people that ought to be working. If they want Medicaid, they should be working.
Senator, 2 questions, 1 minute left, very quickly, on sanctions on Russia. Is it time to move forward with that sanctions bill against Russia?
I believe it is. I'm a co-sponsor in the United States Senate. It is, the goal of that is to drain the Russian war machine of the money that they have coming in from selling oil to China and to India. That continues to fund that. We need to stand behind President Trump, who has been clear and consistent. He wants this war to end.
Very quickly, before I let you go, I have to ask you about this battle brewing in the world of MAGA. FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino apparently feuding with Attorney General Pam Bondi over her handling of the files related to accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Let me just ask you, big picture, do you have confidence in Attorney General Pam Bondi?
I do. We ran to make this country safer and more prosperous. Pam Bondi and her team are getting hardened criminals off the streets. America is safer with Pam Bondi as Attorney General.
And do you have faith in Kash Patel, the FBI Director?
I do.
Okay. There you have it. Senator Barrasso, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And And when we come back, Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky joins me next. Welcome back. And joining me now is Democratic Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Governor Beshear, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Kentucky, of course, no stranger to dealing with natural disasters. You heard my conversation with Secretary Kristi Noem about the disaster down in Texas. The last time your state was dealing with severe weather, you actually praised the federal response, praised the response by Secretary Noem. So let me ask you, just as you look forward, are you confident if disaster strikes again that the federal government will be ready to help your state?
Well, my heart goes out to Texas. We have been through this in Kentucky time and time again, and as a parent of teenagers, the idea that your kids might not come home from camp is just devastating. What's most important is that we put these families first, and that we make sure that we learn from this. When we got hit in 2022 and lost 45 Kentuckians, we asked every question after. We didn't shy from anything. We said, when this occurs next time, how do we do better? How do we save 5 more people, 10 more people? And so in 2025, during our 2 floods we've had thus far this year, we saved over 1,000 people in the first 24 hours each time. So what I hope happens is people embrace the questions, because the questions don't have to be a political football and shouldn't be. It's how do we do better? How do we save more lives? How do we get a better weather forecast? Do we have enough people at the National Weather Service? Can we deploy faster than we did this time? All of those things are legitimate if we put the people first and we say we know this is going to happen again. Let's make sure that every time we respond, it's the very best response we've ever seen.
All right, well, let's turn now to President Trump's economic policy. He told me this week he plans to implement blanket tariffs of up to 20% across the board on America's trading partners. As you know, he won your state by some 30 points in 2024. So let me ask you, is this what the people of Kentucky voted for?
No, not at all. This is, what was it, first across the board, then reciprocal, then industry specific. I think there was a company specific tariff proposed. Now we have tariffs on countries if he doesn't like who that country is prosecuting. It is chaos. It is increasing costs. The people of Kentucky, many of them voted for Donald Trump because they thought he'd make paying the bills a little bit easier at the end of the week, and he's just making it harder. I'm seeing small businesses lay people off because of the tariffs on the raw materials that they get, and then Americans put things together and sell them from that. And when a small business is laying somebody off, it's somebody they go to church with. It's somebody who their kids play soccer with. This is going to impact the economy in such negative ways, especially our economy. And then look at what he's doing to critical trading partners like Canada. 22% of our exports go to Canada, or Japan, who he's pushing towards China. Japan invests in Kentucky at a level of almost no other state. The largest Toyota manufacturing facility isn't in Japan, it's in Georgetown, Kentucky.
Well, which takes me to my next question. Staying on the economy, let's talk about, broadly speaking, the president's new tax and spending law, which just went into effect. You heard my conversation with Senator John Barrasso about the work requirements, the estimates that it could kick millions of people off of Medicaid. But Governor, a poll taken this year shows 6 in 10 Americans support work requirements for Medicaid. You've been very clear in your opposition to work requirements, but my question, are Democrats out of step with where the American public is on this issue?
No, because the work requirements are a ruse. What they're doing is they're doubling the paperwork on everyone, not just able-bodied adults, but everyone. What they're hoping is sadly, is that parents with a special needs child who are really busy don't check a box. People who are helping their parents or grandparents with their long-term care needs don't check a box. And then they get kicked off their coverage for 6 months or more. It is wrong, it's cruel, but it's also going to be devastating to rural economies. In my state, we're looking at 200,000 people projected to lose their coverage. 20,000 healthcare workers are going to get fired because of this bill, and 35 rural hospitals, each the second largest employer in their county, may close. What that means is fewer people getting that tax break, fewer people going to the local restaurant, fewer people going to the local bank. This is going to hit rural America, to give a tax break mainly to wealthy people who live in urban areas. It's going to hit all over the United States. It is a betrayal of rural America.
Well, it is undoubtedly going to be a major flashpoint as we head towards the midterms. And I do want to talk to you about the future of the Democratic Party. House Republicans launched an investigation, as you know, into Democrats' handling of the state of former President Biden's mental acuity while he was in office. I wonder, Governor, do you think that there needs to be accountability for how Democrats handled the president's mental health while he was in office?
But when you're the governor of Kentucky, you see a president maybe twice a year. So what I think is that we ought to be, Democrats, Republicans, etc., accountable for everything we do. We serve the American people. And so we should be judged by not only our actions, but our results. But in the end, it's this political football that we see going back and forth, where a win for one is a loss for another. What we've got to get to is a place where we put the people first, and we focus on jobs, infrastructure, public safety, public education, and health care, and make sure all the distractions are pushed to the side. You know, so much of what's thrown at people day after day, especially in the news, it makes them think that they don't count, that they're not important. When what they care about the most is supporting their family. I remember being on a bus with a bus driver who was telling me exactly how much the groceries cost every month that she could barely afford, but she also knew exactly how much the vacation cost that she couldn't. That's where the American people want us to focus.
But Governor, I guess just very quickly, does this investigation on Capitol Hill, do you think it's important in terms of helping to restore some of the trust that was lost in Democrats in 2024?
I think the way we restore trust in Democrats is to show the American people that we are laser focused on their everyday needs, that we are not distracted by other issues, but that we know that paying the bills at the end of the month is way too hard. That new couple to afford their first rent home. People are worried about paying their child's next prescription, and some people don't feel safe in their communities. That's where they want us to be, and that's where my focus is.
All right, well, speaking of your focus, I want to ask you about your focus and your future. You are serving your last term as governor. You have a trip to South Carolina coming up this week. Of course, the early voting state there. So Senator Del Rosso says you're running for president. Are you?
What I'm doing right now is trying to be a reasonable voice out there that hopefully doesn't just bring Democrats back together, but Democrats, Republicans, and independents. You know, this country has gotten far too partisan, too much us versus them. If we can focus on the core issues that lift up every single American, then we can actually move not right or left, but forward as a country. There ain't no such thing as a red job or a blue job. A job is just good for all Americans.
Governor, is it accurate to say you are considering running for president?
Well, right now, what I'm trying to do is speak out for my people and for the American people, especially with this attack on rural America and the big, ugly bill. Next year, I'm the head of the Democratic Governors Association, and because of this attack on rural America, we're going to win a lot of races that people aren't expecting, because a lot of Republican governors have said nothing, and their economies are going to get hit, and their people are going to have to drive 2 hours just to see a doctor when they're sick, whether they're covered by Medicaid or private insurance. And then after that, we'll see. I would never consider this a couple of years ago, but I will not leave a broken country to my kids or to anyone else's. And so if I'm somebody that at that point, that I believe I can heal the country, then I'll take a look at it.
Okay, so definitely not ruling it out there. Governor Beshear, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And when we come back, Elon Musk announced his New America Party. How have third parties fared in the past? Our Meet the Press Minute is next. Welcome back. Elon Musk announced plans to launch a new political party dubbed the America Party. But it's a reminder that America's two-party system has proven hard to break. In 1992, Ross Perot mounted an independent bid for president, one of the most successful in modern U.S. history, but he still failed to carry a single state. He ran again 4 years later, this time under the banner of his new Reform Party. And he joined Meet the Press to make the case for his third-party bid.
You're absolutely convinced a third-party candidate can win in 96?
Al, I can count. If 62% of the American people want a new party, if the people form a new party, if we come up with a good candidate, if we stay on principle, see, this party is going to be very different. If you want to participate as a presidential candidate in our primaries, you will have to sign a document pledging not to engage in gutter politics and dirty tricks, and if you do, you will be dropped off the ballot the following day. I think that's a big step forward in American politics.
Well, when we come back, it's been 1 year since the assassination attempt on President Trump, a moment that changed the 2024 race and the country. The panel is next. Welcome back. The panel is here. NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor, Tyler Pager, New York Times White House correspondent and co-author of the new book 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America, Adrian Elrod, former senior advisor to the Harris campaign, and Mark Short, former legislative affairs director for President Trump. Thank you to all of you for being here. As I said, this does mark the 1 year anniversary since the horrific assassination attempt against then candidate Trump, who's now serving his second term. Tyler, you write about this moment in your book in extraordinary terms, in the sense that it really was a pivotal moment in the campaign. What did you determine? What did you learn?
Yeah, I think even Donald Trump would say that it was a pivotal moment in his campaign. In an interview with us, he said, I think I would have won, but maybe it would have been a little bit closer. I think one of the biggest parts of that assassination attempt was what it did to some of the supporters for Donald Trump, particularly Elon Musk. Elon Musk was a reluctant supporter of the president, and then after that assassination attempt went full throttle and gave him more than $250 million to expand the effort. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg came out to praise him. So really it coalesced this movement behind Donald Trump. Also, another remarkable part about that day is that Joe Biden, this is the day that Joe Biden met with Chuck Schumer, and Chuck Schumer basically said, you have to drop out. He met with lawmakers who were also putting pressure on him. So this split screen of what was happening on that day a year ago is just quite extraordinary.
Really remarkable. And of course, 1 week later, President Biden went on to drop out. Mark, pick up where Tyler leaves off, which is this notion that it galvanized Republicans, reluctant Republicans around President Trump.
Sure. I think there were two seminal moments in that campaign. One was the debate, and the other was the assassination attempt, because it gave Americans a visual contrast between feeble and weak Biden versus the strength of Donald Trump. And I think it sort of sensed a moment of destiny for Republicans when that happened. Almost as Lazarus-like standing up and encouraging Republicans to fight, I think cemented what was already his lead, sort of cemented at that point for the rest of the fall.
Adrian, someone said to me at the time, a Democrat, that image of President Trump with his fist raised could potentially sink Democrats' chances. You were with the Biden campaign at the time. Is that how you saw it? What was that moment like from your vantage point?
Yeah, look, to Mark's point, it really was at a time where we were about 2 weeks from the debate. We were sort of living in this quasi-purgatory period where we felt like we really couldn't move forward as a campaign, even though President Biden was making it very clear he was not getting out of the race. But it felt like the party establishment, even some donors, were not on board with that. So it really was a challenging time on the campaign. And of course, you never want anything to happen to a candidate who's running for president. So I think it was also a very terrifying experience just to see somebody, almost get assassinated.
It was so terrifying. And Sahil, the fallout continues. There's a new report out just this weekend in terms of the failures by the Secret Service. 6 agents seriously disciplined. Talk about the takeaways there.
Yeah, Kristen, there's nothing too groundbreaking in this 1 year report released by Senator Rand Paul, the Homeland Security Committee chairman. The top lines are that the U.S. Secret Service became aware of the suspicious person almost 45 minutes before shots were fired. They talk about line of sight vulnerabilities, lack of resources, operational failures. A lot of these the Secret Service had copped to around the time, and they made a series of changes, including better coordination with local law enforcement. One thing that this report does include is a recommendation for more disciplinary action. Senator Paul doesn't believe enough people were fired, and that more than just those 6 Secret Service agents should have been disciplined as a result of this.
Well, undoubtedly, they will continue to take a hard look at how to make things better. Let's talk about today. Let's look forward. Mark Short. Let's talk about the Republican Party of today. We are witnessing this week, quite frankly, an extraordinary split in the MAGA orbit over a range of different issues. The one big beautiful bill, some Republicans saying, hey, wait a minute, you campaigned on cutting the deficit. This bill adds to it. You're now sending weapons to Ukraine, albeit through NATO. And of course, this big fight I was just talking about with Senator John Barrasso over the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. This is what Jonathan Martin of Politico wrote. He wrote, Trumpism, it can't be said enough, is not an ideological project, but rather Donald Trump garnering big, beautiful wins as he defines them. Talk about this divide.
I think Jonathan's right as to what it's come to. I think in 2016, when Trump first ran, I think he was trying hard to win over conservatives and promise a certain number of Supreme Court justices, embrace tax reform, embrace a stronger military. But I think over time, it has more or less become a personality party. But I think to Barrasso's point, if you look at the first 6 months, the president's had a really strong first 6 months. As he mentioned, inflation's down. The markets are hitting all-time highs. He passed his biggest legislative accomplishment. He had a successful strike on Iran. The border is secure. All the things in his favor. I think the divisions are actually going to become more exacerbated in the second half of the year, Kristen, because now that you're past the one big beautiful bill, you're going to see the policy differences on between the isolationists and the interventionists come forward. You're going to see him now again pushing forward on more or less the Bernie Sanders trade policy that Donald Trump has embraced, that I don't think all Republicans are supportive of. And so in the first half of the year, much of that's been muted because everything was sort of put on pause. But now he's going full bore again. There's going to be economic consequences. And you see RFK's Maha agenda telling Americans what they can eat and drink is something that Michelle Obama and Michael Bloomberg would have dreamed of. And so I think you're going to see a lot of different policies that are different for Republicans in the second half of the year.
Adrian, it's so fascinating to hear that benchmark of looking forward to the second half of the year. Do Democrats see a potential opening, both because there is this divide that is forming and because, of course, they've been talking a lot about the Medicaid piece of the one big beautiful bill?
No, absolutely. We definitely see an opening here because, number one, we actually have something now that's tangible to run on. The one big beautiful bill, I call it the one big ugly bill. Largest redistribution of wealth in a generation, takes away health care, raises costs for American families. This is something that Democrats can go out there and very easily message. You already see a lot of Republicans who voted for the bill who are having a hard time going home and trying to defend it. The bottom line is Democrats do have something now that we can take back to the states and take back to our constituents. We just need effective messengers to go out and there and do that. And I think you just saw Governor Bashir really making an effective case for why this is a bad policy for the American people.
You laid down a marker. He maybe moved the needle a tiny bit towards saying, maybe I'll look at running for president. Sahil, is this going to be really the centerpiece of the midterm elections, the Medicaid piece of this tax and spending bill that was just passed?
It absolutely will. The big beautiful bill overall, the one thing that both parties agree on right now is that this will be the defining issue of the 2026 midterms. And we saw just a little preview of that fight in your interviews with Barrasso and Bashir. We're going to hear Democrats talk about this as a big tax cut for the rich, paid for by cutting Medicaid and SNAP benefits, including for working class individuals. I think one of the ironies here is that a lot of Trump voters, a lot of MAGA voters in rural areas are going to be some of the biggest losers, the hospitals and providers that are most likely to lose as a result of this. And Republicans, unlike 2018, when they were caught flat-footed by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the attempt at ACA repeal, that blue wave, they do see this avalanche coming. They're trying to turn things around by going on offense early.
Tyler, one of the things, and I was trying to get at this with Governor Bashir, was this notion of how do Democrats win back the trust of voters? And you have this really remarkable anecdote in your book around the debate where President Biden's team really pushed him to do that early debate. Why, and what were the implications?
Yeah, we look back to April of last year, and they felt that Biden was not winning that presidential race, and they needed to do something to shake up the race. And they felt the best way to do that was to put him on the debate stage.
Like that, boy?
We have in the book, it says, we want you to reach the widest audience possible. And so they felt the best way to move forward was for Biden and Trump to stand on stage together and present two choices for the American people. Obviously, that backfired and led to a cascade of problems and him dropping out. But you're right, I think the Democratic Party does have a big trust issue that they're trying to work through, and new leaders are trying to chart a path forward.
All right, it's anecdotes like that, obviously, the Democrats and Republicans will be looking at. Thank you all for a fantastic conversation. That is all for today. Thank you so much for joining us, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Conspiracy and cover-up. Some of President Trump's most outspoken supporters are now turning on his attorney general. MAGA backlash over the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. This big starts right now.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
The Justice Department's Epstein memo this week sparks a MAGA.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, the search for victims in the Texas Hill Country is interrupted by heavy rain as officials warn of a renewed threat of flash flooding. Then how Russia used Brazil as a launching pad for Vladimir Putin's deep cover operatives around the world. And from New York to Seattle and across the globe, why some of the world's most populous cities are slowly sinking.
In a place like Mexico City, up to 20 inches a year of sinking. In the United States, it's a little bit less, but it's still a sort of slow motion crisis that's occurring across the country.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by.
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% US-based customer support. Consumer Cellular, freedom calls.
The ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the News Hour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. A new round of heavy rains and a renewed threat of flooding in central Texas today interrupted the search for those still missing from the devastating 4th of July flash floods. 10 days after the fast-moving waters of the Guadalupe River swept away homes and vehicles, the full extent of the human toll is still emerging. The death toll has risen to nearly 130, with more than 170 people still unaccounted for. Tony Polhetsky is a reporter with the Austin American Statesman and Austin television station KBUE. Tony, what are conditions like right now, and any indication of when searchers will be able to get back to work?
John, we have had flash flood warnings throughout the region all afternoon as bands of heavy rain and thunderstorms move through this area. Of course, everyone is looking to the sky given what happened here about 10 days ago. But with regard to the rescue, as we know, it was halted earlier this morning due to that flooding threat, that continued flooding threat. But officials say they are prepared to begin resuming the search for possible victims of this flooding as early as late today and definitely overnight and first thing tomorrow on Monday.
As that search goes on, is there a possibility that some victims may never be found?
John, that is the grim reality that many families are beginning to confront, given the fact that now the search has gone on for so many days. There are emerging conversations, particularly, for example, in the legal community here in Austin, about what that can mean with regard to possibly obtaining death certificates, settling the estates of some of the victims of the flood. John, I'm told that soon after 9/11, the Texas legislature actually put a new law in place that would allow loved ones and families of victims of natural disasters to obtain death certificates within 10 days of a disaster similar to the one that unfolded here.
And talk about the process of what our officials are doing to identify those who have been found.
John, this is a very difficult task. What I'm told is that local justices of the peace in Kerr County have relied on a number of ways to try to identify victims of the flood, including visual determination of some of the victims. At the same time, though, we know that autopsies have been ordered for some of them, and their bodies have been taken to both medical examiners' offices in Travis County here in Austin, as well as Bexar County in San Antonio. John, we're told that in addition to that, authorities are also relying upon rapid DNA that they are actually sending for testing at the University of North Texas, that's outside of Dallas, to try to verify and confirm the identities of some of the victims before releasing them to their families for funeral services.
And speaking of funeral services, I understand they are underway, funerals and memorial services. I know you've spoken to people who've lost family members and other loved ones. Well, tell me about those conversations.
As you can imagine, particularly with parents who have lost their young children, the grief is just unimaginable. The fact that there are so many funerals happening across the state. Right here in Austin, we know that a number of young girls died at Camp Mystic. This tragedy has impacted people that I know, that my family knows directly. So I think of Lenny McCown, who died alongside her best friend at Camp Mystic, Abby Cole. I've been in touch with the parents of both of them. I also think of Mary Stevens, who was an 8-year-old who also died at Camp Mystic. And so the families are of course continuing to grieve, as is the entire community, and by now knows of all of their stories.
Senator Walensky with some heartbreaking details from Austin, Texas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In the day's other news, Israeli strikes in Gaza today killed at least 32 people. One of the strikes was on a water collection point where 10 people died, 6 of them children. The Israeli military said the site was not the intended target, but the missile malfunctioned. Strikes also hit a home in central Gaza where 9 people died, and a group of people walking along a Gaza City street, killing 11, including a surgeon on his way to work. Gaza officials say the Palestinian death toll so far in 21 months of war has surpassed 58,000. And in the occupied West Bank, funerals were held for 2 Palestinians killed by settlers this past week, including U.S.-born Palestinian-American Saifullah Musalek. 2 wildfires near the Grand Canyon are growing rapidly, fueled by hot, dry winds. Park officials said a historic lodge on the North Rim was destroyed, along with the visitor center, a gas station, and a wastewater treatment plant. The burning plant released chlorine gas, forcing firefighters to evacuate. The European Union says it's holding off on retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods in the hopes of reaching a trade deal on August 1st. That's the day new 30% U.S. tariffs against the EU and Mexico are to take effect. On ABC's This Week, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said President Trump doesn't like the draft trade deals he's seen so far.
Well, these tariffs are real if the president doesn't get a deal that he thinks is good enough. But, conversations are ongoing, and we'll see where the dust settles.
Among the major products the United States buys from Europe are cars, pharmaceuticals, and wine. And at Wimbledon, world #1 Jannik Sinner beat 2-time defending champion Carlos Alcaraz to win the men's title. It's Sinner's first Wimbledon win and 4th Grand Slam title. Alcaraz had won the previous 5 head-to-head matches between the 2 rivals, including an epic final